students. So today we are going to begin with the first chapter of supplementary reader Footprints Without Feet. The name of the chapter is Triumph of Surgery and it is written by James Alfred White, who was born in the year 1960 and died in the year 1995. He is famously known by the pen name James Harriet, who was a British vet surgeon and writer and had written a series of books, each consisting of stories about animals and their owners. In this chapter, there are a few difficult words, and for your convenience, student, I have given you the meanings of those words, which will help you to read the chapter thoroughly. When you will be reading the text, these words are definitely going to help you a lot. So, without delay, let us jump into the story. The story starts when Mrs. Pamphray, who is our first character. The first character is Mrs. Pamphray, who is a very rich, resourceful lady, and she has a pet dog. The second character, the pet dog, whose name is Tricky. She takes her pet dog, Tricky, for a walk outside. The third character here I introduce him. He is a doctor who is none but the author himself, Mr. James Harriet. When Mrs. Pamphray she takes her dog Tricky outside for a walk, uh, the doctor, Mr. James Harriet, he sees the dog and he is quite in a shock that the dog looks like a bloated sausage having legs at each end. The doctor is very compassionate, very passionate, and also an honest man, and he quickly finds out that how this condition happened. Actually, what happens? Tricky, he's a pet of Mrs. Pamphray, and because Mrs. Pamphray fed him too much and didn't care to give him any exercise for his muscles, he became very fatty and ill. Now this doctor, Dr. Harriet, who's a vet doctor, whom Mrs. Pamphray used to take Tricky, he he had already advised Mrs. Pamphray to feed him little less and take him for a regular walk, give him plenty of exercise, which he does not do. Now what happens? Because of overeating, he becomes hugely fat, just like a bloated sausage with a leg at each corner, and his eyes looks like bloodshot and rheumy, and he stared straight ahead, and his tongue always lolled from his jaws. Now, Mrs. Pamphray, when the doctor asked this lady that how this condition happened, and then she began speaking that I thought this dog is suffering from malnutrition and has very less energy. That's why I started feeding him little extra between meals to build him up. And what is that extra? Some malt, cod liver oil, and ball of Horlicks at night to make him better sleep better. So also she said, I'm not feeding much, just not much, nothing much really. Now the doctor asked, did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you? The dog became a greedy dog who could deny no food. So the lady said that the dog loves ice creams and chocolates and cakes. I can't bear to refuse him. I looked down again at the little dog, and the eyes of the dog always demanding something to eat. So I gave him whatever he likes. Okay, so the doctor understood where the trouble lies. Tricky's only fault was that he was greedy and he had never been known to refuse food. And there was this condition like he would take a meal at any hour of the day or night. Now the doctor asked about the exercise which he has advised this lady for the dog. Then she gave an excuse saying that the gardener is not keeping well, and that is why the dog is not has not been playing any ring throwing game recently, and he has his walk with her. The doctor, when asked about the exercises, the lady said that not really he is doing much. he is just having a walk with her. Now the doctor got a little troubled, and he became little aggressive too, and now gave the final solution, that the final solution is a surgery. I have to perform a surgery to save the dog, and for this surgery I have to take the dog to my clinic. The narrator as well as the doctor, Mr. Harriet, somehow somehow he takes Tricky to his hospital for treatment. He knew the fact that Mrs. Pumphrey would never leave the dog, but still he gave the final warning that if she doesn't allow him to go with him, he might die. So she had no choice and finally gave the dog to the doctor. The doctor, he took the dog along and puts a bed for him in his surgery. The doctor, what he does, he takes the dog along and gives him a place to stay with some other dogs which he was having at his surgery, means the at his clinic. So the first 2 days he gives the dog nothing to eat, and the dog also, he was so fat that he was not even able to walk. It was so difficult for him to walk, always panting, always struggling on, drooping in his harness. So the doctor, first 2 days he gave the dog only water but nothing to eat. On the third day the recovery came to be seen. The dog wanted to go outside. On the third day he started playing with the bigger dogs, and he was chasing them, he was running, he was having a friendly struggle with them. He also licked the balls of other dogs to eat the remaining food, because he was overfed. He was like a fatty fellow, and because of his overweight he was not able to move. Now after 2 days he lost some of his weight and finally was able to move. Here the doctor, what he did, he gave him nothing to eat, and for the first 2 days he kept him on water, and finally he got enough strength that he started playing with the other dogs. This was actually the plan of the doctor. He was not going to perform any surgery, but he was going to give him less to eat and a lot of exercise, so that he just could lose his overweight and become a normal dog again. So what happens, he that time when the dogs were fed, dogs were given food to eat. Now this time, this silky thing, this rich lady's dog, he started licking the ball of the other dog to eat the remaining food. Now the condition of this dog started improving rapidly. Also he started fighting for his meals with other dogs. Now the doctor has to call the mistress. He called Mrs. Pamphre to give her the news, because he knew that she would be really worried about the dog, and this is the reason that he calls her and tells her about the condition, that finally his health is improving. Now this lady again starts sending dozens of eggs, wine and brandy to the hospital, because she thought that Tricky needed energy food after recovery. But Mr. Harriet and his partner, they started eating those eggs as morning breakfast. Also, the lady thought that giving him wine, giving him brandy would improve the dog's blood. She started sending wine in bottles and brandy in bottles, but Mr. Harriet and the other fellows, they consumed everything and gave nothing to this dog. After few days, doctor took up White's decision and called up Mrs. Pamphre, because she was really worried, and he called her and told her that now Tricky is fine, so she can take him back to home. Tricky was very happy to see his mistress and jumped into the car. When Mrs. Pamphre said that she won't be able to ever thank for all this wonder, and she said that his surgery had been successful, as Tricky was now cured. then Harriet's plan came into effect. So, you see, guys, there was no actual surgery performed, only the diet was balanced, diet got balanced, and the dog was given plenty of exercise that made him fit. And the story also gives us a moral that everything in excess is opposed to nature. Everything in excess is really bad, whether it is extra food, extra love, or any extra emotion. So, we also should take care of these things in our life, that nothing should be consumed in excess. We have seen many parents pampering their kids, so which is really wrong. Here we have three characters in the story, three main characters in the story. One is Mrs. Pamphret, second is Tricky the dog, and the third is James Harriet. I have given you some characteristics of these three characters. First is Mrs. Pamphret. Mrs. Pamphret, she is a fabulously rich and resourceful person. When you will read the chapter, you'll come to know that how passionately she was attached to her pet dog. She would feed him a lot, brandy, wine, eggs, cod liver. Also, she was very sympathetic and emotional. She was so attached to the dog that she could not actually figure out that what is good for the dog and what is not. She was feeding him everything that the dog wanted, and this made the dog almost die. She was compassionate and caring, because when the dog was not keeping well, she was constantly calling the doctor, and when the doctor took him away, she was really worried about the dog. Impractical, because without thinking, she was giving everything to the dog, which made him severely weak, or we can say hugely fat. So this is all about Mrs. Pemfere. Go into the depth of the chapter, read the text, and you will find these characteristics of the lady. The second character is Tricky, the dog. The dog, as I have discussed, he was looking like a blotted sausage. His eyes were rheumy, bloodshot. His tongue was his tongue was lolled out of his mouth. He was overweight and hugely fat. Also, he was so greedy that he could deny no food. He was finally transformed into a lithe and a hard muscled creature after lots of exercise and very less food. We also came to know, when we saw the dog playing with the other dogs, the friendly struggle that he had with the others. It shows his friendly nature. And at the end of the story, when finally Mrs. Pemfere, she comes for the collection, she comes for taking him back. He sees the car of his mistress, and finally jumps into the lap of the lady. This shows that how loyal and how passionate he was. So, last but not the least, Dr. James Harriet, who was a tactful, wise, a competent fellow, who was very practical, very pragmatic and gutsy, because he performed without even performing a surgery. He transformed the dog into a agile fellow. Also gluttonous he was, because whatever the lady sent for the dog, he consumed it everything along with his fellows. He ate all those things and gave nothing to eat. But we cannot blame this man, because obviously feeding these things to the dog will definitely going to harm harm his health. So that's okay. So this is all the story is all about. I hope you enjoyed the story. Now the suggestion is to go read the chapter thoroughly and enjoy this beautiful piece of prose. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll be back very soon with the another chapter. Till then, bye bye.